Well, hello, everybody. You are at session one, season one of my podcast. My name is Howard Snooks, and I am coming to you from beautiful downtown Boulder, Colorado, which has been my home for, let's say, the last 47 years. Now, the title of my podcast is Bridging Generations. And I got the idea because I was a guest on several young guys' podcasts recently. And it just struck me that there's a lot to be said about communications between people, younger generations and older generations. I am now 76 years old. And the fellows that interviewed me were all between the ages of 25 and I think probably 40. And it was just so interesting. We really enjoyed the conversations. There's definite differences between the generations, and I thought that would be something really to explore. Um, Now, it made there are other kinds of bridges that can be discussed as well, and so I have in mind for future guests, um, perhaps someone who's in their 90s that might be my father and maybe a woman who is my age or perhaps younger, just to discuss how the perspectives are different according to many different differences that we're going to bridge on this podcast. So I'm just by myself today. I thought I'd take this time to introduce myself, but for the most part, we'll be running a guest and interviewer type podcast here. But I'll start with some of my background. Like I said, I'm 76 years old. I was born September 18th, 1949 in Durango, Colorado, which is where I was born and raised. And I come from this really long line of pioneer ranching families, both on my mother's and my father's side. For example, my great-great-great-grandfather, Dennis Daly, came to Boulder in 1859 with a mining company. Now, he didn't stay a miner. He ended up being a rancher. And his daughter then married a Danish immigrant named Henry Nelson, and they went down to southwestern Colorado and ranched. So that's on my dad's side. On my mom's side, I will say this, my dad was also born outside of Durango in this small town called Bayfield. And my mother also was born in Bayfield. And I had two sets of great-great-great-grandparents who came to Colorado before it was ever a state on her side. They both ended up in the Pueblo area, one in 1859, the other in 1866. So the other good news is both of my sides of the family love to take family photos. So I have all these great family photos of people born in the, 1808 or something like that. So I really feel like I'm lucky to have that. So I did not grow up on a ranch, although my parents both grew up on ranches. My dad decided, and my mom, I'm sure as well, they wanted to modernize their lives. And so they owned a business in Durango, and so we lived in town, and my other cousins all lived on ranches. So my sisters and I were city cousins, I guess you'd say, living in Durango, which some people think is kind of funny. But I graduated from Durango High School in 1967 and went to Colorado State University and got my degree in psychology in 1971 from there. Now, CSU is a great university. I really had a great time there. And it was interesting. My parents really sort of directed me towards CSU rather than, let's say, CU. Not because I think they could have gone to CU if I insisted, but it's a land grant university. And in their minds, that's where you go. When you're from an old ranching family, you go to the land grant university. So that was why I ended up there. But it was a wonderful experience. I had heard something about New England from a fifth grade teacher of all people. Mr. Burton was his name. And he had grown up in Maine, and he told us such stories about Maine that it really inspired me. And even after college, I decided, well, I'm going to go and move out of Colorado, at least for a while. And so I ended up first in Maine, where I couldn't find a job, and then I moved to Boston. And I worked there for a couple of years in a psychiatric hospital. Now, I had gotten some, I grew up during the Great Society era, so people like me who were interested in mental health careers, we had some options available to us. There were different programs that sort of directed us towards how, if you're interested in a mental health career, here's an introduction to it. So I went to Norwich, Connecticut between my junior and senior years in college, where they had a program designed to encourage people into mental health careers. So we got to work with the patients who are in the state hospital and got to learn the ins and outs, got some seminars and things like that. So it really did inspire me. So I ended up moving back to Durango after a couple of years in Boston, and still was looking for my full-time career, was thinking about applying to graduate school in social work. But I got a job in Durango as an EMT and an orderly at the local hospital. And, I really enjoyed that. EMT work is very exciting. Of course, it's, you have painful experiences that you come across sometime, but I really got to enjoy working with people in that job. And I ended up applying to the Smith College School for Social Work in Northampton, Massachusetts. Now, some of you may say, well, I thought that was a women's college, and it is, but they have a graduate school that's a very well-regarded graduate school in social work. So I applied there, and I got accepted. So this changed my life. This started my professional career. So I moved back to Durango, got the job as director of social work at the hospital where I had left as an EMT, and worked there for several years. Really enjoyed it. Got to really do some cool things, like I established a child protection team that was this was the way child abuse cases were being considered, worked on during that time. And so, I got to, really create some things. But I did end up getting sort of restless in Durango. It's such a beautiful town, and I love it so much. But I actually started to think I'd like to be a little closer to, it's a remote area in Durango. And so I decided I'm going to move to the metro area, and I got a job in Boulder as a school social worker. This is back in, it must have been 1978 that I got the job as a school social worker. I worked there for a few years. In the meantime, I got married. I married my boss. She was the principal of a special needs junior high there, and I was a school social worker for that school. And so we got married, and we ended up having a baby boy about a year after we got married. And then it was interesting. She was in graduate school herself in getting a degree in education administration. And she said, boy, I just don't want to do this. I don't want to be in administration. I want to stay a teacher. I said, oh, get your PhD. You should get your PhD. She says, well, if you want a PhD seems so important, why don't you get one? So I ended up applying to the Smith College PhD program in Northampton at Smith. And I got into that. So started in 1983, I started working on my PhD. And I finally finished my dissertation in 1993. All my coursework was done, my fellowships were done and everything, but it took a while because we'd had a second child by this time, and I needed to raise my children, be a husband, make a living, and write this dissertation, which is, it's a hard thing to do, to get one completed. But I did it. And then I ended up working. I had a private practice as a psychotherapist in Boulder, and one of my specialties was doing child custody work. So I would be appointed by a district judge in one of the counties, Boulder, Jefferson County, or Adams County, to do child custody evaluation when there were parents who were unable to make a decision about child custody, and there were some complicating factors. So I would do an evaluation and make recommendations to the court. So that was sort of how I ended up being known in the community quite a bit. And so I did this for many years and really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being a psychotherapist. I had other kinds of cases as well as the custody cases. And then I retired I quit my private practice, and I worked for the last couple of years at the University of Colorado at their student health service in the psychiatry department as a director of social work there. And I really like to do that because I got to be a member of a team. I had colleagues to work with and university students. I really enjoyed working with university students and learned to run groups as well when I was there. But I retired from that after a few years. I was 66 years old, and retired and having a good time. Had done some traveling, did some bicycle trips with my wife and some other friends. We went to some cool places, like even went to Cuba. We went to Spain. We went to Argentina. We were going to go to Turkey, but then a big flood hit in Boulder and my house got flooded. So we had to cancel the trip to Turkey. And then things really changed for me in 2015. My mother had died a couple of years previously. She was almost 90 when she died. My father was still alive, but the year started with him passing away unexpectedly at age 93. So that was how the year started. Pretty soon after that, my uncle passed away unexpectedly. And then my wife of 34 years announced that she was divorcing me. And it was, you always hear this, that men never know, they are clueless about things. And I will dispute that to some degree that I was clueless. But the truth is I was totally surprised by her decision to divorce me. And it ended up being a very, very painful sort of situation. But I recovered from that. And then my older sister ended up dying. And then to kind of, cap off the year, I was visiting a friend outside of Lubbock, Texas, who lived on a cotton farm. And I was there visiting just before, at Christmas time and just after Christmas. There was a big blizzard that hit, and I'd forgotten something in her car. So I went out to the garage to get something out of the car. And on the way back, I tripped over a step and I fell into, of all things, a weed whacker. And I hit the blade, although it had a plastic cover on it. And what it did was just shear off the ball of my humerus. And it was kind of a bad situation because the blizzard was so bad that no one could come to get me. So I was kind of stuck with this, ended up, severely broken hip, no blood really. I didn't cut anything, but it was broken and I could barely move. So I had to spend the night lying on the floor. My friend had some whiskey, so she gave me some whiskey to help me get through the night. And then the next morning I had to drive. She drove me 45 miles on this bumpy interstate because the blizzard had lifted, but still there's plenty of snow, and snow drifts on the highway. Every bump, would just about kill me. But I made it to the hospital and had emergency hip replacement surgery. So that marked the end of, death of my father, my sister, my uncle, my wife leaving me, and then this broken hip. So I realized, man, this has been quite a year. Finally, I got back from Lubbock. I had to stay down there in a rehab facility because after you've had surgery, you can't really get on an airplane for a while because you might get what's called a pneumothorax. So I had to stay down there for over a week. Finally get back home. And I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and I still got a copy of newspapers at the time, not the digital copy, but an actual paper copy. I was kind of looking through it, and my little dog was sitting there with me, my little Shih Tzu, Oso. And I thought, man, I need a sign from the universe. Everything has changed in my life. What am I going to do? And so I opened the page of this paper, and there was this article. And the article was about how baby boomers remain this really large demographic. They were, still had money and they were buying things, but there were no models in that age range. And so they needed a baby boomer models. Well, I'm born in 1949. I fit that demographic just perfectly. So I thought, okay, this is my sign from the universe. So I am going to become a model. And I did it. I got some training at a model and commercial acting studio. I got a portfolio and I got an agent. And so I ended up, walking in Denver Fashion Week model shows. And I did several fun commercials, really fun commercials. One where I was like this guy who had bought this $10 million condo at the Four Seasons in Vail, and I was surprising my family with this gift. That was a really fun commercial. And there was a number of them like that. Subaru commercial, UC Health hired me quite a bit. And that, that sort of carried me through, except COVID got in the way. And one of the things that happens with COVID is all these things like commercials and stuff were kind of put on pause. And the auditions changed. You had to do self-tape auditions. So I had to learn how to, run a camera and, memorize lines and stuff and do it on a self-tape. So COVID has been over for a few years, but they decided to keep the self-tape going. So I still get some auditions. I haven't had many gigs lately, but we'll see kind of what happens with that. I still have a agent and a portfolio, and so I'm looking forward to that. And also, since that time, I've done some international traveling. During COVID, I sort of forgot how to go through an airport. Not literally, but I realized I was sort of nervous about going through an airport. But I overcame my fears, and I've been to Finland and I've been to Spain recently, and those were both really. I really loved those, going on those trips. I had met some people online, actually, that we just became friends online, and I ended up getting invitations to visit these countries and meet these people I'd been talking with online. And so they got to be great guys. I really enjoyed them. And so I, enlarged my repertoire here. So this is my next gig. I'm starting a podcast. One of my, I was trained as a psychotherapist, had a 45-year career as a therapist, and I'm now doing some online life coaching. If anyone is interested in doing that, maybe we can make contact and we can talk about that. But this is sort of comes from that. I really enjoyed so much my work with university students. And I thought, that's really maybe a service that I can provide, is to see how are things the same and how are things different for people of different generations. I have two children. They're now, one is 43 and the other is 40. So they're not middle-aged yet, but they're getting on the older side of young people. But I just think that this is something that might really turn out interesting. What are the different viewpoints? One of the things, you hear so much about is that the loneliness, especially of young men, that they kind of go home and, play on video games or, they're big gamers or something, but they're not, getting to know people. There's marriage rates are down. People aren't having very many children anymore. The birth rate in the United States is below replacement, and that's not just the United States. It's many countries in the world. I think Africa has a few countries where the birth rate is still above replacement, but that's the only countries, I think, now that have that. So I just want to get to know that, understand that a little better. There may be some ideas that I have that are helpful. I know that young people, um, I think that I can talk well with young people. Well, you guys can be the judge of that, but I enjoy talking with them, and talking things over can just be helpful. And I also want to learn from them. I'm trying to stay youthful in my approach. I Some of the things I enjoy doing is I go to the gym regularly 3 times a week. I have the same personal trainer for the last 13 years, and he is going to be one of my guests on the show. Um, so I try to stay fit. I like to hike a lot. I used to ski a lot, but I have a few glitches in my skeleton now that makes that a little difficult. But I do continue to enjoy snowshoeing. And I love dogs. I had my little Shih Tzu Oso that I talked about earlier. He lived to be almost 16, and he was just the greatest little pal that I ever had. When he passed away, I realized I wasn't ready to get another dog. Maybe I would be later on, but I wasn't ready. But I've ended up fostering dogs. And I think that's I really enjoy that because like I said, I love dogs. I love having the dog vibe. And I love being a transition for these dogs. For the reasons will never understand, they've ended up becoming homeless, and it's just a difficult situation. You can't explain to them, and so then they're all scared and everything, and not trusting, and just they don't know what's going to happen in their lives. So I offer a safe, secure place for these dogs. And I give them a lot of love and pay attention to them. And I help them transition to their forever home when they get adopted. And the agency I work for, which is Farfels, is called here in Boulder, is they don't have a kennel. So every dog that they place is initially placed in foster care. So I provide foster care for the dogs from Farfel. So that's one of the main things I do. I also belong to a social club called the Highland City Club here in Boulder, and that has really been a lifesaver to me. After my divorce, I was pretty shaken up, and I'll just say that I really appreciate how much care and love they gave to me. I will always appreciate that. And it's remained just this very vital organization that's always, they have great food and they have social events. And one of the things that happen in divorce is you lose friends as well, friends that I did not expect to lose. So I had sort of this hole in my life. And so that club has helped to fill that hole a great deal. So I think I have brought you up to speed about myself. And the next time you see me, I'll be interviewing someone. It probably will be Dan, who is my personal trainer, but we'll see. At least he'll be around at some point. But that is it for now.